Hello everybody and welcome back to another not applicable Formula 1 video. I hope that you're well. We have ourselves back-to-back race weekends as we head to Miami for round 5 of the 2023 Formula 1 season for what will be the first of 3 races in the United States this year. It's the second year that Formula 1 will be headed to Florida, and it's another street race, although it's kind of a car park race with the Hard Rock Stadium at its center. The 5.41 kilometer track features 19 corners, 3 straights and 3 DRS zones. Although the circuit has had a little bit of a revamp since last year, they've completely resurfaced the track and they've added water to the marina section too.
Clean urinal water.
One thing I would like to preface before we head into my predictions is that the early weather forecast is completely all over the place. Like, we could have blistering sunshine for one of the sessions, followed by a torrential downpour for the next. And where there is mixed weather conditions, there is also mixed fortunes when it comes to Formula 1. But with that being said, let's get into my predictions. Let's start with the best drive of the weekend. And part of me wants to go for Williams again after what Alex Albon was able to achieve in Azerbaijan. Like, he did so well in that sprint race, but Logan Sargent has had another tough weekend and I think he needs a little bit more time. So instead, I'm going to shine the light on Esteban Ocon. The Frenchman has built his Formula 1 career around being incredibly consistent. Like, look at last year, his consistency and reliability led to him outscoring Fernando Alonso. So it's not often that he has 2 off races in a row, let alone 3. Australia, he was wiped out by his teammate off the restart when it looked like he was going to be scoring points. And then in Azerbaijan, it was going okay during the qualifyings, but then it all fell apart when he had to start both the sprint race and the Grand Prix from the pit lane. That's 2 weekends in a row that have gone very wrong for Esty Bestie, so he's owed a good weekend. He got very lucky last year in Miami after he missed qualifying and started from the back of the pack in 20th place. A long first stint on the hard tyres before changing to softs under the safety car saw him rise all the way up to 8th place by the end of the Grand Prix. Okay, he did need Vettel and Schumacher to collide in front of him.
So lucky.
But he's had 3 really tough races already in 2023, and I feel like he's been saving all of his luck for this visit to Miami. If he can be as good in quali this weekend as he was in last weekend and keep himself out of chaos, an Esteban Ocon drive to remember is most definitely on the cards. Moving on to the team that I'm going to be keeping an eye on this weekend, because I think they're going to have a great weekend, it's McLaren. It's been a very slow start to the season, and the team after the first couple of races were pretty ruthless in their post-race interviews. They knew during the car launch that it just wasn't where they wanted it to be, but a couple of upgrades to the floor in Azerbaijan that seem to have worked wonders. Both drivers had a really solid weekend in Baku. Lando got through to Q3 and SQ3. Alright, the sprint wasn't great, although that was more down to the gamble of using the soft tyres, but the race, he slotted himself into that best of the rest position in 9th place, just outside the top 4 teams, and I'm kind of expecting him to make that his consistent finishing spot this season, picking up as many points as possible, depending on how many of the top 8 drivers have a mishap. If you look at it, he was comfortably best of the rest last year, as much as he hated being called that, and once he finds his rhythm with this year's McLaren and the Papaya team are managing to bring those upgrades that they've planned, I don't think it's too much of a stretch to see him being best of the rest again. Whilst his new teammate for this season, Oscar Piastri, seems to be doing a great job at settling into his new team. Sure, he's been a little bit lucky at points, but also very impressive. Like, Bahrain was a non-starter, Saudi Arabia saw damage ruin his race, but then Australia saw him pick up his first points in Formula 1, and then Baku, although he didn't pick up points, I think it was probably his best performance so far over the course of a weekend. First and foremost, he was the only rookie not to cause a red flag in Azerbaijan, so that's a tick. But not only that, he qualified in P10, finished in P11, just behind Lando and Yuki. He managed to keep himself in contention for those points throughout, but Yuki Tsunoda just about had the advantage. I think if he continues this trajectory of improving his overall performances every race and then helping McLaren overcome the Alpines, hopefully they can extend their lead in 5th place. For this week's struggle, I'm going against the grain of the 2023 season, and I'm going to go for Aston Martin. Don't get me wrong, they have had a great start to the season. They sit 2nd in the Constructors' Championship, which nobody predicted, and in particular, Fernando Alonso looks to be in some of the best form of his career. 3 podiums in the first 4 races, and even last time out, he was within a second of those podium spots. But in life, progress isn't linear, and it's about time something wrong happened for Fernando this season. But why here in Miami particularly? Well, if we take a short look back to last season when Fernando Alonso was still in an Alpine car, the Miami Grand Prix was one of the most frustrating weekends for the Spaniard. It was one of the few qualifying sessions that he missed out on Q3 after blaming traffic. Then in the race, he ran very close to Pierre Gasly over the opening stint, tried to undercut him during the pit stops, failed, and then spent what felt like an eternity behind the AlphaTauri, which clearly got to him as he then hit Pierre Gasly into turn 1, earning himself a 5-second penalty, and then he was investigated twice for missing the turn 14 chicane and was handed a second time penalty. Like, whenever you get 2 penalties in the same race, that's just a sign that it's not your weekend, so maybe Miami will strike again at Fernando. Then moving over to Lance Stroll's side of the garage, he actually had a pretty good weekend in Baku, generally speaking, but he has dropped to 8th place in the Drivers' Championship now, and I know he didn't finish the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, but looking at those top 8 drivers, he just isn't good enough to be in and amongst that battle, in my opinion. Now looking at Ferrari building some momentum, Mercedes improving, if very slowly, I can see Lance Stroll being left behind in that top 8, and this weekend is the first weekend where I could really see that happening. Let's get into my predicted podium then, the sharp end of the grid, and I'm starting off P3, Charles Leclerc. Baku was the season reset that the Monaco man needed. Just a clean weekend with no explosions or penalties to be seen. Charles Leclerc was back to his absolutely rapid best in both qualifying sessions, picking up pole position in qualifying and the brand new sprint qualifying too, and I could most certainly see him getting another pole here in Florida, but the problem he has is if he does start at the front of the grid, the Red Bulls won't be too far behind, and they're just about the only cars that can still overtake on long straights, and unfortunately that's what we have in Miami. Which leads me quite nicely to P2, Max Verstappen. It would be silly not to have the Red Bulls towards the top of the field again, considering they finished, 20 seconds ahead of everybody else in Baku, but Max had a strange weekend. He spent most of it moaning about the sprint format change or calling out George Russell in interviews after the sprint race. His mind just didn't seem to be in the right place. Like, I know he's a professional with an incredible record since he's joined Formula One, but at the same time, he's been known to lose his head every now and then, and this weekend's race being just 1 week after Azerbaijan, I think he still might be a little bit off of his best in Miami. Which is why P1, I'm going for Sergio Perez, because as I said before, it would be insane not to go for a Red Bull victory after how they've started this season, but on top of that, it's another street circuit. Car park circuit, but we'll call it a street circuit. So far, he has victories in Saudi Arabia and Baku this season. Perez just seems to fly when it comes to a street circuit, and unfortunately for Sergio, after this weekend, we have quite a lot of traditional circuits coming up, apart from Monaco off the top of my head, and I think Checo wins this weekend, moves to the top of the driver's standings, everybody gets excited about a possible championship battle, and then Max Verstappen goes on to win pretty much all of the races until the summer break, ruining all the fun. The problem with this week's crazy prediction is that we had so much crazy in Baku, I genuinely think we might have used it up. Like, we saw Lewis Hamilton talk a cameraman into being his engineer, we saw Charles Leclerc nearly kill a cat, we saw Max Verstappen and George Russell collide, which led to Max calling George a dickhead in the pit lane and a princess in the interviews, and then in Esteban Ocon's case, he looked to be going for a zero-stop strategy before almost running over half of the Formula One media. Like, Baku was stacked with crazy.
Yes. Crazy.
But one team had a very quiet weekend. Haas. The team that is known for throwing up a crazy weekend or two every year. Also on top of that, it's the first US race of the year, and as the only American team on the grid, there will undoubtedly be something happen. I think this could be the time that we see our first teammate contact of the year. It would be very Haas to bring in Nico Hülkenberg to settle the team and add experience, only for Kevin Magnussen and Nico Hülkenberg to collide, take each other out of the Grand Prix, and send Gunther Steiner into a swear-infused spiral on the pit wall. Now, I know that I predicted the Mercedes coming together in Baku, but actually we saw Lewis Hamilton pull off a very sweet overtake on George Russell, but this time it's Haas, and Haas always deliver on some drama when you need it. That's why they're the main characters in Drive to Survive. I'd say that I'm equally skeptical and hopeful about this weekend. It has the opportunity, especially if it has some mixed weather conditions, to be very entertaining. So effectively, let's all start our rain dances now and see what we can do. I'd love to know your predictions though in the comments down below, as well as over on the community tab if you want your predictions read out, as I'm going to be live for the qualifying and the race on Sunday as well this weekend. So make sure you leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you're new, and I'll see you this weekend.